Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm excited to kick off a new series where I will be working on the special edition book cover for my latest book, King of Dust. I've always dreamed of releasing a special edition hardcover of my books, and thanks to your incredible support, the Kickstarter for this cover and this book edition was 150% funded. Stick around till the end for a sneak peek of the finished book cover. Let's get started. In this first part of the series, we'll be diving into the background work. Backgrounds are a real challenge for me since I don't do them often, so this entire process took quite a bit of time. First, I laid out the basic colors for the background in the form of a gradient. This helps set the overall tone and mood for the cover. Once the background gradient was in place, I moved on to laying in the flat colors for the characters, Darius, Yura, Urian, and Astrid. This step is crucial to see how the characters will look with the overall color scheme of the cover. Fortunately, I had a really good idea of how I wanted this cover to look before I got started. I didn't do any thumbnails or anything, but I did have an idea of what the color scheme would look like based on the standard edition of the book. The regular paperback version of this book has only 3 colors on the cover: white, red, and gold. I guess 4 if you also count black as well. So knowing that, and knowing that I wanted to keep this piece kind of moody and desaturated except for the really intense colors of red and blue, that helped guide my selection process for what the characters themselves were wearing. You'll also notice me make the piece black and white occasionally. This is so that I can check that the values of the piece aren't too close to each other. I don't want the characters to accidentally get lost in the background. Now comes the tricky part, painting the buildings. I started by photobashing different royalty-free images of castles that I liked to create one mega castle where Darius used to live. This step involved a lot of trial and error to get the right composition and to find the right angles for the buildings that I was using. With the layout finalized, I moved on to creating rough shapes in grayscale and adding shading. This step is essential to give the buildings depth and dimension before painting over them. It was a meticulous process that took way longer than I anticipated. I think the reason I don't really like painting architecture is because it is incredibly boring to me. It lacks a lot of life and is very rigid given the nature of what it is, so I lose focus easily when I'm working on these kinds of pieces. The entire process is a lot of paint, check, and going back and forth between the reference photos that I have and then the actual painting that I'm doing. I also have to make sure the light source is consistent, and on top of that, I decided to break this down into chunks so I wouldn't totally lose my mind. I don't know if that ended up helping me or not, but all in all, I was able to kind of drag myself through it. I started by painting the buildings in black and white so that I could manipulate them with color like I wanted to later, so you'll notice that I very quickly just laid a red gradient over everything. This is because these buildings are going to be kind of in this red foggy mist in the background, so I'm able to render them in black and white. I can see the values easier while I'm working actively on them, and then I can add color later just for the sake of keeping myself sane. Fortunately, these buildings are kind of tiny in the background, so I didn't really have to put a lot of effort into the detail or how they looked. Just getting the general impression of the building was enough. What's absolutely nuts to me is this video is effectively a compressed down version of a 3-hour painting session, and even after 3 hours of working on this, I wasn't even done with all of the buildings. There were still more that needed to be done after this. I definitely wanted to kind of rip the band-aid off, so to speak, before I got into the rest of the piece. That's why I didn't start with the characters first, because I knew I was going to be having the absolute worst time with the buildings. I didn't want to burn myself out. I didn't want to do the fun things that I like to do, which are painting faces first, and then be really disappointed later having to work on the buildings at the very, very end when I'm already tired of looking at the piece. Sometimes, though, when you're working on art, you gotta do things that you don't want to do, and this was one of those times. Honestly, it just gave me more practice doing more architectural stuff, and fortunately, the perspective wasn't super complicated. I was able to find the references that I needed, and I could just kind of plow through this. I don't know what I would have done if the illustration on the cover had been mostly building. I think I would have cried. And I like the little buildings, don't get me wrong. I think it adds a lot of character into the background. It's a nice background element that does give some context to the setting without giving the whole setting away. So I think that they're an important part of the cover in terms of how they ground the entire piece. I was just very glad to be done with them. If you made it this far in the video, is there anything that you absolutely hate to paint? Let me know in the comments, because I love seeing what everyone's pet peeve is in terms of art. And now, as promised, here's a sneak peek of the finished book cover for the special edition of King of Dust. Here's what I got done during this painting session, and here's how those same buildings ended up looking on the final version of the cover. If you want to see the rest of the painting process and also see what the entire book cover looks like, be sure to subscribe and follow along. Stay tuned for part 2, where I'll continue to work on the background and bring more details to life. If you liked this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more art content. Until next time, keep creating and stay inspired. Bye for now.